So what? I thought that it was my turn!
I'm asking the questions here!
You already asked the question!
Okay.
Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. I am Denie and I'm really glad that you decided to join us today. So this week we will be finishing our origin story. We broke it up into two parts for you. So if you did not watch part one, then you will want to go watch our first video. That is in the description for you. So go ahead, click on that link, watch part one, and then you'll be all set to watch part two. So today we'll be picking up where we left off last week and just kind of finishing that off for you. So if you have any questions as you watch the video, be sure to type them in the comments and we might have a Q&A for you after this video.
So we left off that you can bake.
Mm-hmm.
Did you learn baking through the internet, cookbooks, or where did it come from?
So growing up, my mom always baked and cooked, and everybody in the church that I grew up in knew how good of a baker she was. And there was another lady with the same name as my mom at that church, and they both were great bakers. So they made quite the pair. And everybody always sought out their dishes at potlucks and looked forward to coming and having dinner at our house and all that jazz. And she always let me have lots and lots of liberty in the kitchen with both cooking and baking. And she would go work on books that needed done or paperwork or whatever. And I would go and bake in the kitchen. And where the desk was, she could like see into the kitchen. So if I had any questions or anything, she would just kind of answer and I would just bake. And I always enjoyed it and was always pretty good at it, and some days I would just get a feeling that I wanted to bake, so I would bake. And honestly, some of my best memories growing up are centered around Christmas cookie decorating, because every single December, my mom and my grandma and my aunt and several other aunts on and off would come to my parents' house. And my mom would bake dozens on top of dozens Christmas cookies and mix up all kinds of frosting, and we would decorate all kinds of cookies. And then my mom would donate it to the church. She would donate it to nursing homes, to the jail in Seneca County, like all over the place. And people loved her cookies. Actually, at the church that I grew up in, they were referred to as Mama Oakleaf's cookies. My maiden name is Oakleaf, so that was my mom's last name, and everybody called her Mama Oakleaf, and they were her Christmas cookies. Everybody knew that. So I knew that the recipes that I had inherited from my mom, who had inherited those recipes from either her grandmother, so my great-grandmother, or some of them also came from my grandmother on the opposite side, so my dad's mom. And she had all kinds of recipes that were just old-fashioned country cooking, and everyone loved them. And I loved to make them. They were some of my favorite recipes, and they meant a lot to me. And I mean, baking is extremely therapeutic.
So how did baking tie into your next step in your trail there?
Yeah, so all of the memories and the feelings that I've always gotten from baking and the sense of accomplishment. Baking is therapeutic, and I mean, working with your hands, producing something, having an end result, and then I guess the thing that sold it to me and that I really clung to was when you bake for somebody and you either gift that item to them, or even if they buy it and they bite into it, and that first look on their face when they bite into it, and the smile, and then like the oh wow, and look of shock, or the look of just joy. And I mean, baking is something, sweets and desserts in general are something that people have strong memories associated with, and it can take people back to their childhoods. A lot of the recipes that I use are my great-grandma's, so they're a much more old-fashioned style recipe. So people will bite into them and they'll be like, this tastes like my grandma's recipe, or this reminds me of my mom's cookies or my mom's pie. And it just brings joy to people. And at a time in my life when I was working in a job where I was seeing pain and I was seeing just the ugliest parts of people's lives, because I mean, first responders and children's service workers, they're only called at the worst points in people's lives. So they don't get the opportunity to see people in the better parts of their lives very often. And so I felt that I was just deprived of that, and it was extremely appealing to be able to get to feel the sense of spreading that joy and the sense of giving people that joy and that nostalgia on a regular basis was very appealing to me at that point.
So how did the baking idea and baking for people transform into an actual plan?
Yeah, so it took a while. I thought this up, and the thought of it was terrifying for reasons that I went over last week. Just lots and lots of things on our plate in general. And so I had the idea, and I had multiple different plans of how to accomplish the idea, but I just didn't know which one to choose. And my breaking point was, as I spoke about last week, there were times when I would be driving to work and I would just contemplate driving to mental hospital instead of driving to work. And one day I was just driving, and I had been sticking it out way longer than I wanted to, and I probably should have. But one day I was just driving, and I'm like, why am I putting myself through this torment? Like, there's a perfectly logical, solution right in front of me, and I'm blatantly ignoring it just because of the fears of what if. And I didn't have a good answer for myself. So I typed up my 2-week notice and I turned it in, and September 12th of 2018 was my last day. And then I was done as a children's service worker.
How long from your last day, September 12th, did it take before the bakery actually started coming into an actual business?
It was really hard because I was in such a terrible mental state, and my life was completely drained of just joy and me as a human. I was not me. And it just took me a while to actually get to the point where I could even start to get the energy to do what I needed to do. And it probably took about a month and a half. And it was a bit of a slow start. I got my baking license because I am a licensed baker. And that process did not take place until November 2nd. So it was a bit of time in there where I was kind of doing stuff, but it was like here and there, and I just did what I had the energy for, and I wanted to do it. I wanted to attack it with more energy than I did, but I just didn't have the energy. It's just a direct reflection of where my mental state was at that point in time.
So what kind of things did you need to get done before you could get your license?
It's really not that difficult of a process. A bit tedious at first, but all you have to do is make up some mock labels and have people come and inspect your home and fill out an application and pay them $10 and you're licensed. So it wasn't hard. It was just, I put off calling to get the inspection set up for a while. And it's not a super intense inspection. They're just inspecting your kitchen to make sure that it's not a safety concern and that there's no health concerns for food-related items. But it just was, part of it was that we hadn't even finished unpacking. There were still boxes. So we got married in July. We moved into our apartment in July. This was September 12th, so July, August, September. So that was like 2 months. And it wasn't just like, a box here in the spare bedroom and a box there, like shoved under the kitchen cabinet. There were stacks of boxes that I would come home to after work and would just ignore. So part of it was that we had to completely unbox everything, and not everything, but some of the less essential items, and actually make our apartment presentable for a inspection. Yeah, that's not something I like to admit, because I am a bit of a neat freak. And that just, it shows how dark of a place I was in at that point, that I could just ignore the mess and the clutter of boxes.
So do you remember, after getting your license and everything, and you're baking, you're making money, do you remember the first order that you actually met somebody from CPS face to face for a delivery? Do you remember what her reaction was when she saw you?
Yes. So we got out of the car. We met her to give her order, and it was the first time that I had seen anyone that I had worked with face to face since I had quit. And her reaction was that she didn't recognize me. She's like, I specifically remember her being just like excited for me and exclaiming. She's like, "Oh my goodness, you look so good. Like, you look like a completely different person, and you just look like you are relieved, and you have this weight off of you." And she was right. The sad part about that is that I wasn't even back to 100% yet at that point, because that would have been December of 2018. And I can confidently say that I did not truly begin to feel 100% like my old self until spring of 2019. I actually had forgotten what it felt like to feel like myself until it happened.
All right, so we know baking is therapeutic for you and you really enjoy it. Do you remember of any baking disasters when you first started?
I still have baking disasters. I actually had one this week. I'll share all that later. But no, the very first 2 orders that I did actually were a struggle. The first one, it wasn't that much of a struggle. It was just more of, cakes are difficult if you don't have a system in place, and if you don't have a lot of the tools, and if you just don't have the techniques and hacks under your belt and in your brain and your noggin. They can be tricky. And so that was it. Really, finding recipes that were easier to work with, that were more durable, and just figuring out the steps that I needed to take for my recipes, that took a bit of time. But the biggest disaster that I have had to date with an order was the second order that I ever filled. And it was an order for strawberry cupcakes with whipped topping. And everything was fine. I did a sample recipe. I tasted it. It tasted great. Made it for the real deal. Everything was great. Put it in the oven, and they wouldn't bake, and I just didn't understand why. And finally, I'm like, well, I'm just calling it. I'm taking them out. They seem fairly done. Like, they might be a little underdone, but that they should just be a little gooey, moist, like, texture to them. And they should be okay. They should make it. And I took them out of the cupcake tin, and they just deflated into a pile. Yeah, it was pretty bad. What happened was the element was out on the bottom of the oven. It had blown the night before. I think that we had made strawberry shortcakes for dessert with dinner the night before, and they were baking a little funky on me, but I just thought that I made them wrong because that's the first time I made them. I just figured it was my fault. And so it had blown the night before a little bit, like it started the process, and then it just totally was gone with the cupcakes. So I had to completely remix the batter. And at like 9 o'clock at night, I'm walking down the street to our neighbor who, thankfully, our neighbors at the time were another police couple at the department. So we were friends with them, and I was able to go down there and just use their oven to get the cupcakes baked. And then I had to carry the cupcakes back down the street to our apartment. So I looked like a maniac walking down the street with a cupcake tin in my hands, and it was one of the big ones with the 24 cupcakes in it, so it was like really obnoxious and obvious, and it was quite the experience.
So you were saying that you had to learn new recipes and new techniques. Where did you kind of get this bakery education from?
So a lot of it was from YouTube, some of it from Pinterest, and then I actually took a couple of cake decorating classes at the Adult Education Center in Mansfield. And so I had a great cake decorating class that I took there, and it really helped me with just some of the super, super, super basic little things to do that I wasn't doing, and made my life a lot more difficult because of it. And that's all that I have formal education. The rest was my mom and the Christmas cookie decorating. That's the extent of my education. But no, I mean, I've kind of thought about maybe doing some culinary school in the future to expand my knowledge and education, but it's not really in the cards yet.
So as you started, you were selling to individuals, families, some parties here and there. You start to do wholesale. What did that look like?
So as I said, spring of 2019 is when I really started to feel like myself again. And myself, me, who I am very outgoing, and I like to network. I like to make connections. I love to talk to people. And something I had been putting off that was part of the plan, or a thought about how to open the bakery, was to reach out to local businesses and see if they would allow me to sell my items through their business. And I mean, a place that is very, very near and dear to both of our hearts and is located locally is the Pickwick Place, and it's a farmer's market. And for those of you who aren't from around here, the farmer's market, there's 3 different buildings on the property. So they have the farmer's market as one of the buildings. The second building is a venue for different events, and that's actually where we ended up getting married. And then their third barn, they're all barns, they're not just buildings. The third barn was nothing yet, but they had begun to do some construction work on it. And they started advertising what it was going to be. And it was kind of like a craft barn, like mixed with an antique shop or an antique mall, and just kind of an open-ended, like something involving vendors and booths. And I didn't really know what it meant. I just knew that that would be my opportunity. So I clicked on the Ask Us Questions button, and I sent them a message on Facebook, and I said, hey, I'm a local baker, and I was wondering if I could sell through your farmer's market and or the stalls, because I know that you advertise crafts and antiques, but I didn't know if you would be open to a baker. And they said, well, drop off some samples and we'll get back to you. So I met up with them and gave them some samples, and I heard back, and they were interested in allowing me and giving me the opportunity to sell my items in both locations. So that was a huge deal. And I'm forever grateful to them, because it gave me a place to reach the public, because working out of my home, it was really just word of mouth, and it didn't have as much credibility behind it as being able to sell through a business. And so this gave me that option. And I mean, this is what allowed us to be able to have steady enough income to buy the house that we bought. This is what actually forced us to buy the house that we bought, because our apartment it did not have a dishwasher, which sounds like a luxury to have a dishwasher. But when you are baking, it's not a luxury, it's a must. It's really, my dishwasher is currently sitting behind the camera. That is what my dishwasher was. And we would spend hours doing dishes. The dishes would take up our whole kitchen. That would take up, like, I think at one point I just started using our kitchen table as where I would put all of the dirty dishes, and then I would keep the counter space open. It was a disaster. It was a small kitchen. The table was part of the counter space that I used, but there was also a washer and dryer in the kitchen, and I used that as part of my counter space too. And then we got to a point where we started setting up an 8-foot folding table in our living room, which our living room only really had enough space for one person to walk down between the couch and the TV stand. So we would have to like scooch past the table, and my husband said that it was frustrating because he could not watch TV. It was a disaster. So it forced us to have to get a different kitchen, and so we bought a house, and we bought our house for the kitchen, and it was the best decision that we ever made.
So then what?
So we're here. COVID-19 happened, and we have closed temporarily, and to kind of make up for baking, we've been producing videos. So hopefully you guys have gained some kind of either joy or just instruction. Maybe you've learned something from the videos that we've been producing, because we really started producing these videos as something for you guys to be able to do for fun with your kids, with your family, for yourself in quarantine. So yeah, that's where we are.
So what next?
The goal is to reopen and be able to supply goods to Pickwick again and expand. We are actually going to be hiring over the next month or so and growing, and we have some other plans up our sleeves once we get some people on board with us and develop a team. Then we have some other visions that we would really like to start working on, but right now it's not feasible with just the two of us. So growth, that's what's next.
So before we end, is there anything else you'd like to add to your origin story?
Yeah, I would really love to thank everybody and anyone who was a part of the growth and laying the foundations of Denie's Sweet Oasis. We would not be here today, and we would not be in this house if it weren't for all of you. Thank you to both of our parents, my mom and dad, and my mother and father-in-law, because without the foundations that you laid, we would not be here. Thank you to my mom for the recipes. Thank you to my in-laws for the stand mixer. That was a wedding gift. Without it, we would not have a bakery. Would not be able to do what I do. Also, thank you to everybody at Pickwick. You guys are so amazing to work with, and you've blessed me and my husband with wonderful opportunity and just a plethora of support. And it's great to work with you guys, and I've learned so much from the discussions that we've had. I've also would love to thank everybody who has been a customer throughout the past year and a half that we have been open. It seems like so much longer. And thank you to all of you guys that are watching. And while I'm thanking you, I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to thank you for subscribing, and thank you for liking and following us on Facebook and Instagram. And once you do subscribe on YouTube, you will want to make sure to hit that bell so that you get notified every time that we post a video. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you next Tuesday.